Hey everybody, in this video session I'm going to show you how you can use environmental images to generate renderings like this one, where you take your product and place it inside a natural environment and then use the image to give color and light to your scene, as well as using the image for the backdrop. To do this, we need high dynamic range images, and not only do we need a good, how could I say that, image for lighting, we also need a high-res image for the backdrop. If you go to hdrlabs.com and then click on Smart Image-Based Lighting Archive, you will get to this website where you have a nice variety of different lighting environments, from indoor to outdoor, warm lights to cold lights, overcast and clear sky. And if you take a look at those images, you can already see that they describe different lighting environments. What is so important about those is the images from HDR Labs supply you with those very important high dynamic range images. So those are the images which we can use for lighting. And as you see, this image, if I open it in preview, looks a little bit washed out. And they also supply you with those JPEG images. And as you can see by the name, this is an 8K shot, so that's a high-res image. That means if I go into, for example, here, preview, you can see that the image size is 8,000 by 4,000. So that means I can really zoom nicely into it. So that's the original image. And have always a nice and sharp rendered background. If you use a low res image, I'm going to increase that drama effect a little bit. It might turn out that your rendered product will be nice and sharp, but your background image noticeably is less sharp, is blurry, and then you can see that that rendered object was actually copy and paste onto that backplate, which is not really something you want. You want the sharpness of your image match the sharpness of your rendering. Okay, so let's go to Blender. Here's my scene, and now we have in step 1 to set up our environment correctly. I'm going to delete the sun and this cube. I'm going to add a plane. And I'm switching this to 3D view and camera. Then I have to change the orientation of my camera a little bit. And go to my ground plane. The ground plane has two functions. On the one side, we are going to use this as the shadow catcher, as well as to use it as a geometrical reference, because we need to first match the perspective of the background image. So what that means, I'm going to World, click Use Nodes, and then go to Environment Texture, Open, go to the Desert Highway, and then I'm going to select my reflection HDR image. Click Open, and then I can click Render. Well, first, you will notice that my camera looks basically perpendicular onto the street, but I actually would like to look this way. So you see I can rotate my camera, and that actually will then show you a different part of this world environment, which is a really nice feature of image-based lighting. So I'm rotating this one 90 degrees along the z-axis. You also notice, for example, here, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see how blocky that background image is. Again, that's the reason why you need a high-res JPEG later to replace the background. And you can see that the camera was shot in a way so that the street is a little bit off to the left side. And also what is important here to understand is what direction did the camera look to, and how could I say that, how's the ground plane. For example, this street actually goes down a little bit because this camera pretty much is centered on the horizon line. So and this street feels like it's going down. So we have to do the same with our ground plane. So I can maybe scale it a little bit wider. And then I would have to scale it a little bit along the x-axis to stretch it. And then from a side view, if I start rotating this ground plane, you can see how magically now it starts lining up actually with the way how the street flows. I can move it up and down a little bit to fine-tune it. So that, for example, is a very important step to do, because not only will this way help us to have the camera and scene orientation correctly set up, but also we can use this ground plane to actually position our product on correctly. So if we put a car on, the car has to sit perfectly on this ground plane. Okay, so this is basically step one. I'm going to quickly save this. And now we can bring in, for example, our product, and I can show you that website that's sometimes nice to use. That is blendswap.com. It's a community-based website where people upload all their different products, but you also have materials and scenes, and you can download those for free and then use them inside renderings for props. So that's where, for example, I downloaded this Camaro car model. So here we have the car now, and I have to now position it correctly. You also notice that I have everything parented of my car to the main car body, so I can easily just pick the biggest object and rotate it, and everything will follow. Because there are two things we have to do. On the one side, probably we need to adjust the scale so that maybe the car feels like having the right dimension in relationship to the street, as well as we have to set the correct, how could I say that? Orientation, because our car needs to be sitting on that ground plane. So maybe like this, and then you can see that the car feels still to be too big, so I can scale it down a little bit more. And it's very important that the car will sit on the street as good as possible, because that's going to affect the quality of our shadows. And then you can play around with the positioning of the car inside the scene. Do you want to put the car more into the background to make a far away shot? Do you want to have the car be maybe more somewhere here? So you have a close-up, and you can play with the composition of environment in relationship to the background image. And again, as it looks like the car here is, it feels like the car is a little bit too high and also too big for the street size. So you have, or you will have to do a lot of camera and prop rotation adjustment till you find somehow the correct orientation through which that picture then was shot. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how we then can create the rendering nodes for the compositor. So we can use this image-based lighting image to illuminate our scene, and use the background image for the backdrop, and use this floor plane to actually create the shadows below the car.